Trash is out of sight and out of mind, right? Wrong. When it comes to recycling, we could do a whole lot better. I'm going to discuss three different countries that all recycle, us included. Um, Europe, which Germany in particular, and Japan. Um, I will start with Germany. Germany has a very strict recycling policy. Sometimes to the extent of even fining people for putting some of their items in the wrong bag. And by bag, I mean they have several different bags all dedicated to different recyclable materials, such as paper, plastics, and metals. Um, Through that policy, they have recycled more than 65% of all their waste being produced, which, I mean, Germany is not perfect by any means when it comes to recycling. Um, they are actually moving in the right direction when it comes to it with their policies and their various. There are various other countries in Europe that are following suit with Germany, but they still have trouble with importing way too much raw materials and not emphasizing on recycling to the extent that Japan does. Which brings me to Japan. They have an unbelievable deep eye for separating waste products and recyclable materials, even going to as far as separating the caps from and labels even from plastic and glass and metal containers. Um, they are well known for how clean their streets are uh, for one simple reason. They just don't have that many trash cans. They believe that you should be accountable for your own trash. In a documentary I watched, a man who was there for work from the UK actually had to adapt to this custom, even going as far as putting the trash just in his bag or in his pocket until he got home, where he could properly dispose of the waste. They also live by three very simple rules, which they actually taught us here in America: um, reduce, reuse, and recycle. Um, the documentary actually covered five R's, is what they call them, uh, which only a few more hardcore recyclers in Japan actually follow, um, which is reduce or resist, reuse, recycle, or repair. So in that, with that being said, resist. Obviously, they try to buy as little and consume as little products as they possibly can. Um, and if anything that they own breaks, they will repair it and use it to its fullest, to the fullest, their fullest ability. Um, they actually are not like very new to this recycling concept. Um, they have in the past, in ancient times, they have had several different ways that kind of led them to this um, kind of idea of repairing and resisting the urge to over consume. One thing was they actually had um, wooden umbrellas, and they had like kind of paper mache on the outside that they used. But they actually had umbrella repair people who would come in and, or they would take their umbrellas too, and they would repair it for them so that they don't have to buy a new one and throw away their old one. and they had different rags that they would carry their um, goods from, a market or whatnot, a home in, and they would reuse it constantly to even to the extent of if it started to rip or get ruined or get too dirty, they would turn them into rags and actually start cleaning stuff with them. Um, After a little while, their population started to boom. A lot of technological advances happened in the 20th century, and they actually started to build up on that waste, which they quickly realized and lost that they lost that you know that ability to uh, kind of reduce and reuse and recycle like they did in the past. Um, so they actually started this whole new program that I discussed uh, regarding recycling. Um, they even have uh, towns that they refer to as zero waste towns, in which the residents of the town will personally wash, clean out all of their recyclables and categorize them into 34 different bins, and personally take all of those recyclables to the recycling facility, in which there will be somebody who will monitor them and make sure that all the stuff that they have in those said bins are actually what they say they are. Um, and of course, they produce compost for their own gardens, in which they grow a lot of their own food, which kind of led them to getting to that first R and the 5 Rs of resisting to go out and buy too much product to actually have to recycle. Um, so those are just a few examples of one or two countries. So this brings me to our great US of A. More than 50% of the materials that are considered to be recycled by Americans are actually rendered useless, by what's known as residue. Residue is the little bits of other materials left inside of stuff that are what we believe to be recycled, such as batteries, plastics, and various metals. Um, so a thing that Japan does that we do not is they actually take apart a lot of their stuff, separate all their metals, all the plastics into different bins. But we will just take our items and just assume that we can recycle them and just throw them in our big old bin. Um, the reason for this lack of knowledge and effort to put out for this, residue is our lack of knowledge and effort put into actually separating those items. A lot of the time, uh, we will, just take a box, let's say, that has tape that is obviously plastic all over it, not break it down, and just throw it in our recycling and assume it's okay. But that plastic in with the tape with the cardboard, when it's actually being recycled, makes it so that cardboard is practically unreusable, unrecyclable. So we really have a huge issue with residue, and it's a lot of it is due to those big bins that we get, where we just constantly throw whatever we want into them and just assume that we're being eco-friendly. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. We all, Europe included sometimes, can learn from the attention to detail that Japan puts into reusing and repurposing seemingly old goods and recyclable materials. A big way to do this is to go back to the old ways. When I was a kid, which granted, is not that long ago, we used to have to separate our recycled materials into different bins, such as what Germany is doing. That is crucial to solving that issue with the residue, at least to an extent. And unusable materials that would be mixed in with these other materials. Um, so uh, once we get all that figured out, um, we have to get back into the swing of things, with that uh, separation of different materials. We can actually then try and put an emphasis on following the footsteps of Japan, separating materials into even more categories, making that residue practically obsolete and reducing the environmental impact that all of the waste in our landfills, which could have been recycled, is producing. Um, so after all that information, the big overall issue is this is my planet as much as it is yours, as much as it is Japan's, and everybody else that calls this lovely blue sphere home. Recycling not only helps save the planet, it also helps save our home. It helps us all in the long run. We need to start making steps to a more sustainable future, or it could cost us just that, our future. Thank you.